infrastructure and the ideology of new imperialism. Imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. When we say new imperialism, we are referring to a period of increased expansion of capitalism that was started in the second half of the 19th century and continued until the outbreak of the First World War. In the period known as the New Imperialism, European powers wanted to control African colonies. After achieving unification, in the early 1870s, Germany and Italy joined the struggle to control territories in Africa. Following the rapid economic development that came as a result of adopting the economic policy of free trade, a serious financial crisis affected the Western states in the early 1870s. In order to withstand the economic crisis and protect their economic interest, European states began to take measures. For instance, in the 1870s and the 1880s, the two major European colonial powers, Great Britain and France, partitioned the western part of the African continent into their spheres of influence. The Berlin Conference of 1884-85 enabled European powers to divide Africa among themselves. That led to the physical occupation of territories in Africa, which means the intensification of the colonial conquest. There was European presence in Africa even before the start of the period of the New Imperialism differs from the earlier period in that since that the Europeans came to Africa with a very developed technology. Before the 1870s, although the Europeans had contacts with the peoples of the coastal areas of Africa, particularly West Africa, they were not equipped with efficient firearms to easily conquer the native peoples there. Moreover, the Europeans also lacked appropriate means of communication to control Africa, particularly the interior parts of Africa. In general, the European colonial powers had a great difficulty to penetrate deep into the African interior. At the early days of colonization, tsetse fly and mosquito had almost prevented the Europeans from entering the African interior. Eventually, the European colonizers managed to penetrate deep into the African interior with relative ease, thanks to technological advancement, including the invention of better river boats, steamship, better rifles, and the discovery of medicine to combat malaria. By 1880, a relatively small number of well-armed and properly trained European soldiers had managed to easily defeat the native Africans who had a marked numerical superiority over them. After the Second Industrial Revolution, many of the European states became technologically more advanced, and they developed interest to colonize uncolonized areas in Africa. Industrial development invited new powers to involve in the colonial contest. As we have already mentioned, Germany and Italy were newcomers in the colonial struggle to acquire colonies in Africa. Technology and involvement of new powers in the colonial struggle hastened the development and spread of the new imperialism. The emerging European industries needed a huge capital investment. The financial capital required to run the new industries paved the way for the development of financial institutions like banking and capital markets that could finance the new industries. The expansion of industries in Europe not only demanded excess raw materials, but also importing food for the then growing urban population in the end. Industrialized cities and towns, technological advancement in maritime technology, and navigation. Navigation techniques enabled the European colonial powers to get raw materials and food supply with relative ease, traveling even to distant areas, including the Far East. Improvement in ship building also encouraged the revival of militarism and aggression in the world. Great Britain, which was the first country to embark on the Industrial Revolution, was the strongest world power of the period and had supreme military and naval powers. Its technological superiority enabled Great Britain to build more efficient naval force. Soon other European colonial powers followed suit and modernized their armed forces, including their navy. After the 19th century, the European colonial powers worked hard to consolidate their rule in the areas which they had already occupied. In fact, they also worked to get new colonies, although there were no adequate territories to be newly colonized in Africa by then. The technological boom that came as a result of the new imperialism had some negative impacts on peoples who had their own polities. The militarily superior European colonial states now managed to colonize the entree African continent, except Ethiopia and Liberia, and many areas in Asia and the Pacific Islands. Although the European colonization of territories in Africa was started earlier, the scale had increased dramatically, and the European acquisition of territories reached its peak during the period known as the New Imperialism. When the First World War broke out in 1914, about 85% of the territories in the world had fallen under colonial rule. During the First World War, the colonized people followed their colonial masters, paid sacrifices in military confrontations that had nothing to do with them.